For those of you who have been with us for the last few weeks, what we've been doing is getting into what we've called 50 days of transformation. We've been looking at 7 weeks in which we've been taking some of the most famous texts in the Bible and examining them and pulling out some key principles for life change through them. And so last week, for those of you who are with us, we looked at the most famous, well, what many would call the most famous parable in the Bible, the parable of the prodigal son. And it was really incredible. Pastor Rick covered that. And so this week what we're going to do is look at the most famous psalm in the Bible, Psalm 23. But before we get into that, I want to segue into something that is really going to be the topic of the hour. Let's talk about stress. Let's talk about stress. And I know you're probably thinking, that's the one thing that I really don't want to talk about on a Sunday morning. But let's talk about stress. Does anybody, we have any stressed kind of people in here? Are you just like, if someone were to say, okay, write down 10 attributes of this person, would stress be one of those 10? Yeah, because that's me. I'm stressed a lot, and I think probably a lot of us are stressed a lot because it's kind of the American way, right? Someone once told me, well, if you're not stressed, then you're not thinking about enough things because there's something out there to be stressed about at any given time. And I feel like a lot of us, it's like, okay, you know what? I'm calm. Wait a minute, what am I forgetting? Because if I'm calm, then clearly I'm forgetting something that I should be worried or stressed about. And I think you look at how much money we spend trying to relieve stress in this nation, trying to self-therapute. We've got stress balls you can buy. We have products that exist for no other purpose than to relieve stress. This is a unique time in history. That we have products that exist for that purpose and that purpose alone. We have little gardens you can buy where you can spend an hour combing the garden and that will relieve your stress. And you've got balls that you can crush to let out your latent anxiousness. And the free market takes advantage of it, which is fine. But stress really, at its core, because there's a lot of things that you can use to describe stress, but at its core, really, it's a threat. Okay? Stress is just a threat that we perceive. Whether it's real or whether we just think that it's there, it's a threat. And so when you feel threatened by something, whether it's an emotional something or a physical or a spiritual or a mental something, you have these responses that take place in your body called stress responses. And your blood pressure is going to rise and your pulse is going to quicken and you've got adrenaline that shoots in your body. And there's all kinds of neat little physiological things that can take place. Which isn't necessarily a bad thing, right? If you're standing in a road and you see a car coming to hit you, you're going to have a stress response. Your blood pressure is going to increase, and your pulse quickens, and the adrenaline rushes, and hopefully you can get out of that situation. And it's not a bad thing. It's a natural thing if it's a physiological process. However, the problem is going to come when we take that moment of stress reaction and we carry it with us because there's constantly something that we're stressed about. And our body's in this constant state of experiencing this stress response. And I think many of us, if not most of us, are probably in a state where we carry stress with us in some level or another all the time. And for me, I take it for granted half the time. Oh yeah, of course I'm stressed. Why shouldn't I be stressed? But I think it's been proven over and over and over again. I think we're all pretty aware of this at this point, just because it's so prevalent that again and again, medical studies have been done to show that stress is nothing but devastating, okay? It is negative to experience stress and to hold it with you. It has physical effects, it has mental effects, and I think we're probably aware of that, right? How many of you would be like, I'd rather be stressed than not, if you thought about it? And I think we all say, well, no, I don't want to be stressed. I just am all the time. And really, without knowing it, I choose to be stressed more than choose to be calm. But last week what Pastor Rick did, was look at spiritual health, okay? Looked at the health of your spirit and habits for maintaining spiritual health. So this week, we're going to change the pace just a little bit. We're going to look at a more physical thing, the stress thing, that is actually going to have massive implications on not just the physical side of you, not just your body, but also on your mind and also on your spiritual health as well. Because we're just one unit, right? As a human being, we're not just a body, we're not just a soul, we are a combination of the two. So what affects one is going to affect the other. And so stress has serious implications for your spiritual and mental and physical health. And so if this morning you've come to church and you're under it, if you woke up and you're like, I'm stressed, and you came this morning and you are under stress, you picked a good one. You picked a good one to come to, because this morning we're going to look at the effect of stress on you, but more specifically, we're going to look at what the Bible says is the antidote to stress. Because as in so many cases, the Bible just outright tells us what to do. And I love that about it. Before we get into Psalms 23, because that's going to be the passage we're going to take a lot of this from, first we want to identify 4 of the most common sources of stress, because this is going to play into exactly what we're talking about this morning. This is not a comprehensive list by any means. This is not every source of stress in existence, because this would be a really long list. But this is 4 of the most common sources, okay? And here's number 1. Worry. How many of you saw that one coming? Worry. And there's a reason that I listed this one off first, because, man, we worry, and there's so many things to worry about. And again, I feel like almost worry and stress have become semi-synonymous. You say one and you mean the other, and so on and so forth. But there's so much worry, not just in this nation or as a people, but in this room, there's so much worry. In me, there's worry that's latent, and it's swirling around, and it's ready to take its spot at the forefront of my mind. And of course, it doesn't help that we're in a point of history now in which we have so many more things we could worry about than we used to. I mean, we have to worry about identity theft. At what point in history could you have to worry about having your identity stolen? We have to worry about our cell phones. We have to worry about our social networks. I have a blog I try to maintain the popularity of. You know, I've got to worry about that now. We have so many things that we've got to worry about, and it causes us stress. So I'm going to leave that there for now, and we'll revisit that in a moment. But number 2 is hurry. I promise I'm not going to make all 4 of them rhyme. I'm just not that kind of person. But number 2 happens to rhyme, and it's hurry, because, man, we're in a hurry, aren't we? Have you ever been to a third world country, or really like almost anywhere that's not here? They always have like some kind of name for their pace for things, and it's like blank time. If you go to Costa Rica, they have Tico time, which means I'm going to show at work for 2 hours, like 2 hours late, and it's going to be fine because everyone else did. It's like, let's take this project that in America would take us 2 hours, and let's spend a couple weeks on it. And it's okay for them because and they're like, what? We could do this more efficiently. I go on the mission trip, and we're like, we could do this more efficiently. And they're like, Tico time, brah, chill out, relax. I went to Thailand, same thing. We can work harder. They're like, Thai time, brother. There's a blank. We're in a hurry in America, and so we get stressed out by it because the pace of our lives goes quicker and quicker and quicker. Would you guys agree? It seems like the world just goes faster and faster and faster. Now we have technology, and so the entire world is at the tips of our fingers, and as a result, we live in a world in which we want it now, and we want it done immediately. And you know, there's a phrase, I want it done yesterday. We're in a hurry. We've got to have stuff done quick, and that pace we set it stresses us out. It stresses me out. If you think of the simple illustration here, it's so much more stressful to run to somewhere as opposed to walk to somewhere. To slow down. But it causes us stress because we're in a massive hurry. And number 3 is the fact that we face many, many, many choices. We have a lot of choices, and we come to these forks in the road. We come to these points, whether it's a massive decision that's going to affect our lives and the lives of everyone we know, or whether it's a tiny decision like what kind of cereal am I going to buy. We face so many choices. And of course, you know, the same thing that we just said. In today's world, we have more choices now than ever. And we say, okay, more choices means more freedom. So it's a good thing. But in reality, I feel like it paralyzes us half the time with just the inability to make all of these choices. Just go into a store, okay? 50 years ago, you say, I'm going to buy a tube of toothpaste. And there's just one. And there it is. I guess that's the toothpaste I'm getting. You have the toothpaste. I'm buying toothpaste. And now today, you walk into a store and you're like, I'm going to buy toothpaste. And you're like, okay, well, I've got this brand, this brand, this brand, this brand, this brand. And then you say, okay, you land on a brand. But then now they're like specialized. There's like 40 different kinds of things. You're like the anti-whitening, or I could add, you know, the anti-plaque, or like the mega sparkle. And there's so many different choices now. And I think that's just illustrative. It's just illustrative of the world we live in. Because we want the choice, we want the freedom, we want the liberty to choose. And now we have so many choices that it paralyzes us with the stress of it all half the time. So that's number 3, choices. And here's the last one before we get into our text here. Number 4 is suffering. Suffering and difficulty and hard times. Because God knows we go through that, don't we? Every single one of us, we experience hard stuff. And it's hard to deal with. So like I said, we're going to leave those there for the moment. We'll let those sit for a minute. And we'll get back to them in just a moment. But before we go any deeper into addressing these antidotes the Bible gives us, we're going to look at this text. This really, what we can call pretty confidently the most famous psalm in the Bible. And this is Psalm 23, because what David is actually going to do here is he's going to give us what ends up being an incredible handful of antidotes that we're going to get out of this wonderful psalm. Okay? Antidotes to the kind of stress we deal with in our modern life. So here it is. I'm just going to read through this straight through, and we'll revisit some of these specific verses as we go. But this is Psalm 23. You guys will recognize it as I start reading it. The Lord is my shepherd. I shall not want. He makes me lie down in green pastures. He leads me beside still waters. He restores my soul. He leads me in paths of righteousness for his name's sake. Even though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for you are with me. Your rod and your staff, they comfort me. You prepare a table before me in the presence of my enemies. You anoint my head with oil. My cup overflows. Surely goodness and mercy shall follow me all the days of my life, and I shall dwell in the house of the Lord forever. So I think it's for good reason that this is the most beloved psalm in the Bible. It's beautiful, and it's encouraging, and it's a wonderful picture of David's relationship with God and what our relationship with God can and should look like. And so it's not by accident that the psalm has given comfort to people for literally thousands of years. But I think it's a lot more than just pretty words. I think it's a lot more than just a comforting bunch of statements. Because David is, whether intentional or not, he's giving us a formula that's going to banish stress from our lives really, really quickly. So today we're going to pull some of that formula out, and we're looking again. We're taking those 4 sources of stress, and we're going to pull from out of this 4 habits that adding to our lives will destroy those sources of stress in our lives. Ready? 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 Come on, man. How many of you are sleeping? I can't see that well, but I'll find out. So like we said, okay, the first source of stress was worry, right? And again, I think it's very well placed in the terms of that list. It's worry, and so many of us, we worry. And the biggest, specifically, the kind of worry we're going to focus on is probably the most predominant form of worry that we experience, and that's worry that comes from our needs. Our needs, and how we're going to fulfill our needs. Material needs. You say, how will I provide? That's a huge question in this day and age, isn't it? In this country, anyway. How will I provide for me, for my family, for my children? How am I going to pay that bill? How will I take care of myself? How will I be financially secure? How am I going to get a job that's going to make me worthwhile? How will I provide? Any of you relate with these questions? I know every time another big bill comes, I go, what am I going to do? What am I going to do? My first response. Over and over and over again, it's my first response. How am I going to deal with all this? I work in personal training. You lose a client. What am I going to do? That's a weekly, money coming out of my budget. What am I going to do? But remember the very first thing that David said. The first thing that came out of his mouth in writing this psalm. He said, the Lord is my shepherd. What? I shall not want. And so that leads us to the first antidote for stress here. We look to God to meet our needs. That's number 1. We look to God to meet our needs. And all this is doing is saying, God, it's stopping where you're at. It's stopping that flow that says, here comes the need, and here comes the question, how will I fulfill it? And here comes the worry, but it's stopping before you get to the worry point and reminding yourself, you know what, God, I'm going to look to you for my needs. I'm not alone in this universe. I'm not the only one looking out for me. God, I look to you as my provider. And so what this boils down to in the end is it's a matter of trust, basically. It boils down to a matter of trust, and it boils down to where you're going to put your security as a human being and your identity as a human being. Because we put our security in a lot of things, don't we? Money and stuff and jobs, titles, positions, our house, Our car, you want to have a really nice car you're just really proud of? A little too proud of? Our health, okay? Our appearance. We put our identity in these things, right? And so the problem with all those things is what? They can go away. A lot of them pretty easily. Some of you are really aware just how easily money can disappear. How easily a job, a position, a title, a reputation can disappear. Someone once told me this, and I never forgot it. He said, never put your security in something that can be taken away. Never put your identity in a thing that is fleeting and can disappear in a second. And here's what's cool. We can never lose our position as a beloved son or daughter of God. There is nothing that we can possibly do to do that. Nothing can come in from without and pull our relationship with him away from us. Pull away the fact that he is our Father and our God and our Creator and our Provider. We can't lose that. This is what David is saying here. He says, God, you are my shepherd. What is a shepherd? Someone who takes care of sheep, right? You're going to see this kind of continual metaphor that David is going to use throughout this psalm, okay? He says, God, you are my shepherd. You are my caretaker. And you know what? He says, I shall not want. In other words, he says, I have everything I need. If I'm able to sit here and say these words at all, I have what I need for the moment. It was Jesus' whole thing. He says, you know what? Why don't you let God worry about tomorrow for you, and you take care of today. Worry about today has enough worries for itself. Because God is a whole lot bigger than tomorrow or the day after or tomorrow's bill or the next bill after that. And there's incredible, incredible peace in stopping that line of thought. Bill, the question, worry, stopping and saying, God, you are my provider. You are my shepherd. And you know what? I have what I need. And I have what I need yesterday. I have what I needed yesterday. And I have what I need today. And I have faith and confidence that I'll continue to have what I need tomorrow because you haven't failed me yet. And God's not a God who fails in what he's trying to accomplish. There's incredible peace in that. There's incredible peace in not having to constantly look towards new things to put our identity in. There's peace in not having to feel like we're alone in this universe, trying to take care of ourselves and that no one is going to look out for us but us, because that's not true. And I love the way David words this, because to me I read this as almost as much of an affirming statement as anything else. Not just like here's a statement of fact. Not just that, but also it's like he's saying it to remind himself. Because I don't know if you guys know much about David's life, but he experienced a lot of hardship. I guarantee you he struggled with stress from the day he was born to the day he died. And he says, the Lord is my shepherd, reminding himself, stating that, a declaration. And I shall not want, because I have what I need. And he's always taking care of me. I'm still alive to this day to be able to talk about how he's taking care of me. He's saying, you are my shepherd, God. You've provided for me, and you'll continue to. All right, so the first habit we got to take from this is learn how to say this to yourself. Learn how to remind yourself that you're not alone. Because it's when we take the bill and when we take the financial situation that seems hopeless, and we zero in on that. We put blinders on our head and we look down at the bill and the bill alone. Well, it seems pretty hopeless then, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Because you can't see anything else, can you?
No.
That's what blinders do. You take the blinders off and you remind yourself that there's a God who's involved. And that's it. That's the first one. Really, that's the foundation of stress management right there. So number one, again, you look to God as your provider. And you remind yourself that he is your provider, whether you know it or not. That's number one. Here's number two. Moving right along here. Number two, and I found this one semi-humorous sometimes. Obey God's directions about rest. We have any chronic overworkers in the room? Maybe some of you are like the opposite of that. And you're like, yeah, you have to really force me to do any work. But there are overworkers in the room. And I think our culture breeds that. And I am one of them. And I know that some of you are out there as well. You will work, and you'll work, and you'll work, and we hurry. Remember, we talked about hurry as a source of stress because we go, and we go, and we go. Because there's always too much to do, isn't there? There's always work to do, and it feels like you're never going to catch up. Anyone feel like that? You're never going to catch up? I feel like that semi-often. I'm never going to catch up. There's never going to be an end to all of this work. Anyone feel like that? Can anyone relate with me? Is it just me? It's like, am I the only busy one in the room? I know that's not true. My life over the last year has it's gone from pretty busy to far too busy. And so I'm constantly feeling this, and I go, and I go, and I go, and I never really take a moment. So what do you do? What do you do when you never catch up with all the work you have? What are you supposed to do when it never seems like there's an end? But here's something I'm having to learn. This is a truth. There is never going to be an end to the work that you could be doing. Hear that? There's never going to be an end to work. There's never going to stop being work. And so the second thing we have to do here is look to God to meet our needs, number one. And then number two, start obeying his instructions about rest, because he gave them to us. So think about this. This is a really interesting thought. Question for you. Could God have created us without the need for sleep?
Yes.
Could he have? I think he could have. I'm not going to put that kind of, well, God could have done anything, but, he had to make us with the need for sleep. He couldn't do that. No, I think of course he could. He could have made us without the need to sleep, without the need for rest. So why did he? You guys know we're going to spend about a third of our lives sleeping? That's a lot of time. It seems like a waste, doesn't it? It's a lot of hours. We could be doing all kinds of stuff. We could be doing work for him. Why would he program us, create us at a base level with the need for sleep? I think it's because God wants us to understand, to get it through our thick, thick heads, just how important, and not just important, but necessary it is to rest. We've got to rest. Rest is so important that God does it, apparently. You guys know this is the creation story in Genesis. God creates the universe and the world and everything within it. And what does he do on the seventh day? He rests. Now here's a question. Do you think God needed that? He's like, man, I am tired. I really need a 48-hour nap. I don't think so. I mean, he's God. I don't want to put a limit on his energy supply of all things. So why does he bother? Because he created us like him, and he's trying to show us, look, you guys need to do this. He's trying to model for us the importance, the incredible importance and necessity of resting, of not working and working and working all the time. This is so important that, what are the big 10? The big 10 commandments, right? You've got, you shouldn't steal from people. That's important. You shouldn't lie. You shouldn't commit adultery. You shouldn't murder. What's right up there with all these big commandments? Rest. Remember the Sabbath and keep it holy. You guys know what the Sabbath is for? Rest. You say, no, wait a minute, Pastor Nate. No, you're confused. The Sabbath is for God, not for us. Except Jesus said the Sabbath is for man, not man for the Sabbath. It was Jesus who said that. Because Jesus was doing some good work. He was doing the work of God on a particular day, okay? And it was on the Sabbath. He said, hey, Jesus, quit doing that. You can't do any work, even if it's work for the kingdom of God, it was Saturday for them. You can't do it on this particular day. And he said, we weren't created to have to fit into this context set by the Sabbath. The Sabbath was created to force us to not work all the time, to force us to rest. And so this is what we do. We say, well, the Sabbath equals my Sunday morning. So I'm remembering the Sabbath by going to church on Sunday morning, and then I can go back home and start working again. Don't do that. Don't go to church and go back home to work. This is what David says in Psalms 23. He says, he makes me lie down in green pastures. He leads me beside still waters. I like how he says, he makes me. Have you ever had to be made to lie down for a little while? For me, it's I get sick. I work because I'm not smart enough to rest, and I work and I work and I work and I work for months straight, and then bam, I get sick and I'm in bed for 5 days straight, and I can't move. And my body, God is making me lie down before I kill myself. You ever had to be made to rest? Because we're not smart enough to do it ourselves. He's got to sometimes just make us rest. He's got to make us take time away from the work and the hurry and the busyness to rest and to just experience beauty, for crying out loud. You know the phrase, stop and smell the roses. There's like practical wisdom there that's pointing towards the fact that we go so quick that we stop to experience the beauty of the world around us. He says, he leads me beside what? Still waters. He doesn't say he makes me lie down in bed. He says he makes me rest and enjoy the beauty and the thrill of life, because that's an important thing. It's an important thing. And sometimes God has to make us lie down. Sheep are this way. Sheep will walk, and they'll walk until they literally fall over and die. I think the analogy of comparing us to sheep is a really good one. It works out so often. And so God as the shepherd literally has to say, stop, and he push the sheep down onto the ground. Sleep. Stop moving. Sleep. He'll bend their knees for them. Sleep. Sometimes God has to do this for us. So write this down if you got a piece of paper near you, or just write it down in your head. You need rest. You need it. Your body needs it. Your soul needs it. And it's not a waste of time. There's this expectation in the society that if you're not working, you're wasting time. And it's indulgency. It's an indulgence to sit and to relax. Oh, you got a hobby? That's nice. But it's just an indulgence. You're just taking time away from what you could be doing and should be doing, which is work. But you need rest. It's not a waste of time. And that's what the Sabbath is for. God said, look, stop going so often and relax. Sit down one day a week and don't work. Don't work. Even in the busiest season of your life, it's not an excuse to not work, because it is literally a bad thing for you, and it stresses you out when you go and go and go like that. You have to rest. So what do we have to do in that? What should that look like? I think it's pretty simple. Number one, rest your body, i.e. physically rest your body. For some people, this means a nice Sunday afternoon nap. Okay? I know for my father, growing up in the ministry, every Sunday since I was born, he comes home and has a Sunday afternoon nap because he needs rest. Now, please don't start your nap now. Please wait until I'm done. But a nap is sometimes what you need. I am not a napper. When I nap, I've got to force myself to nap because I say, this is just too important for me to not do. And even then, I don't do it enough. I don't rest enough. But rest your body. Give yourself time to rest your body. Number two, refocus your spirit. What I mean by that is refocus your mind and your soul, your spirit on what is important. That's what worship does, by the way. It focuses in all of you on worshiping your God and on realigning your priorities. So you do that on the Sabbath as well. And number three, recharge your emotions. And you do that by what we call recreation, i.e. relaxing stuff. Just relaxing. Different things for different people. Maybe you're one of those book readers. Maybe you like to take walks. Maybe you like to watch television or play some kind of game or swim or whatever it is. Some kind of recreational thing to recharge your emotions. That is not a waste of time. It's good. Okay? God doesn't just encourage it. He tells us to. He had to make it a commandment. He didn't say, here are the 9 most important things, and here's like a bonus if you can fit it in. He said, and of the 10 commandments, remember this day that I've set aside for you to rest, just like I did when I created you. Rest. Here's a question. Does it have to be Sunday? No.
No.
It doesn't. Otherwise, I'm in trouble because my Sabbath is not on Sunday. It's not on Sunday. Sunday, if you haven't guessed, is a work day for me. I'm working right now. It's a work day for me. You say, well, wait a minute, I know where Nate's going because I'm an Old Testament history buff and I happen to know that Saturday is the real Sabbath. I had someone argue with me once, what is the real Sabbath, Saturday or Sunday? Sunday or Saturday is a work day for me too. Monday is my Sabbath. It ends up being Monday for a lot of people who work in the ministry because you finish with the Sunday morning busyness, and Monday is the Sabbath for me. And it's not just a day off, okay? Because if you call it your day off, you're just going to fill in all the gaps that you've left out from all the other work days. It's a different thing. It's another kind of work, but it's work in sowing into your body and your mental and spiritual health and getting rid of the stress you're going to carry with you otherwise. It is not a day off. It is a Sabbath. So use it the way God intended for you to use it because you need it. And you say, well, Pastor Nate, I just feel so guilty when I relax. Jesus didn't. If you've read the life of Jesus, you'll know that he ministered, and then he would like wander off into the woods. And they're like, where's Jesus going? He's like, don't follow me. He'd be like up on a mountain, they're like waddling along after him. He's like, stop, no, you stay here. This ain't you time, this is Jesus time. And he'd be, he's gone. He would spend time alone. Doing what, you wonder? Deeply spiritual things. He's probably building a church back in there in those woods. He's relaxing. He's taking his personal Sabbath. And it would be like on a Tuesday or a Thursday. He would finish all this ministry and he'd go, you know what, I'm exhausted. Because he was a human. He was fully man. He would go off into the woods, he'd go off into a mountain to be by himself. And he would relax, and he would refocus his mind and spirit, and he would rest physically, and he's recharged, and then he would come back down and hit the ministry again. You see it over and over and over again through the Gospels. We've got to wonder, if we're not going to take a cue from Jesus, who are we going to take a cue from? We're not going to take a cue from Yahweh in Genesis 1. Who are we going to take a cue from? Rest. That's number 2. Obey his commands about rest, please. Number three habit that's going to dispel stress in our lives: go to God for guidance. Go to God for guidance, because this is a massive thing, because one of those most common sources of stress is the fact that we face so many decisions, so many hard decisions often. And it's hard to make up our mind, especially when those decisions are important. Sometimes they're micro decisions and it's a tiny thing. What am I going to order at lunch today is a small thing. But sometimes it's big. Am I going to stay here or take this opportunity 6 states away? Am I going to go to this ministry or this ministry? Am I going to take this course in college or this course? Which one is going to determine my future? Sometimes you have big decisions to worry about, forks in the road, multiple choices, and you can't decide. And I've been facing stuff like this last year. What do I do? These are big decisions that affect me and my family and my friends. It's hard, and it's stressful, and I've had to learn to do this. Otherwise, I'll go crazy. I have to learn to go to God first. And what do? Very simply, you sit down with God and say, God, here's this decision I'm facing. I need help. I need wisdom. In James chapter 1, James says, if any of you lacks wisdom, let him ask God, who gives generously to all without reproach, and it will be given to him. He said, if you don't have the ability to make a good decision yourself, ask God for the help to be able to do that. Because God he's faithful to give you the wisdom you need to make a good decision. So you go to God and you say, God, give me wisdom. And you pray and you ask for help. And here's a question: do you think God is always going to give you a sign in the sky? I think those of us who have been Christians for more than a couple years probably know that he's not going to do that, especially as you grow more seasoned in your faith. And you're like, well, wait a minute. Shouldn't it be the other way around? Shouldn't, as I grow more seasoned in my faith, that God should be giving me more miraculous signs than ever? But no, what you'll see over and over and over again is people who grow closer and closer to God, God stops leading them around by the nose. He stops hand-holding, like a parent who, when there's a child and he's trying to help his son or his daughter, grow up and make good decisions, he's helping them when they're young, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 years old. Okay? Well, then you get a little bit older, into the teenage years, and they grow into adulthood. And you can't lead your child around by the hand all the time, can you? Eventually you get to a point where you say, I've got to let you make your own decisions, because otherwise you're never going to be able to make your own decisions wisely and correctly. And God does this to us too. He wants to grow us up to the point that he can let go of our hand and say, you know what? I have fostered wisdom in you, my son or my daughter. And now I want you to choose. And I want you to choose with the confidence that I'm going to be with you and I'm going to work with you regardless of what you choose, because I'm bigger than a single decision. And you know what? So often I think we get caught up on that little problem. We say, here's a decision. And if I choose this or this, one of them is going to be in God's will, and one of them I'll miss God and maybe ruin his master plan for my life. And here's a question: is God so small that one of our decisions could ruin his master plan? I think he's a lot bigger than that. Especially when we're at a point where, God, what do? I want to follow you. Which one should I choose? Is he so small and so limited that we could foil his entire plan for our life because we chose one thing, hoping that it was where he wanted us to go? And he's like, oh, you missed it. Sorry, plan's ruined. I think he's a lot bigger than that. I think we do him a discredit when we make our decisions as if he were too tiny to be with us either way. Okay, so you go to God, and you say, Father, lead me, guide me. Sometimes he'll give you that incredible sign. I've had that. And a lot of the time, he'll say, you know what, I'm going to lead you by that still small voice. I'm going to help give you the wisdom you need to make a wise decision. And David says this, he says, he leads me in paths of righteousness for his name's sake. The decision is not up to you and you alone. You're not alone in having to make a wise decision. It's not up to just your wisdom and just your knowledge and just your understanding. God is faithful to give wisdom and help to those who ask. And again, I love the way David says this. It's half a statement of fact and half a reminder that he's not alone. Half a reminder that God leads him. And so the last point here, number 4. Number 4, we trust God in the dark valleys. We trust God in the dark valleys. And we all go through those, don't we? The suffering. We talked about how suffering and the hardship is a large source of stress. But we all experience that stuff. We all experience the hardship and the difficulty, the suffering, the loss, the pain, the dark valleys. And you're going to go through a lot in life. You're not done yet. I'd love to sit up here and tell you that if you trust God, you'll never suffer. But I can't, because I know it's not true. Because I've trusted God throughout my adult life, and I have suffered. I when I was younger and foolish, I used to believe that if I just followed God my whole life and I never made a wrong decision, if I stayed within his will for my life, I would never have to suffer. And in my younger adult years, I didn't suffer. And then following God in all my decisions, I hit a period, this last year of my life, that has been suffering. And I've suffered, and I said, God, am I wrong? Have I made a wrong decision? He told me again and again, nope, you're just suffering. Life has happened, and I want you, to some degree or another, I think he likes it when we go through suffering because it gives him a chance to remold us into a better image. To break out some of those terrible habits we built up in ourselves and to mold us into something better. Because you can't remold a problem or you can't remold a mistake in a pot you're molding without breaking it and starting over. So we're all going to experience that stuff, and we're either going to respond with grief or we're going to respond with fear. And fear is extremely common. And grief, there's nothing wrong with grief, okay? Grief is fine. There's a time for grieving, the Bible says. But fear, on the other hand, is a negative thing. But the Bible never tells us to grieve not. Grieve not when you're suffering. What does it tell us to not do? Fear not. Again and again and again. It says fear not a lot. Why? Because we human beings love to get afraid. We're so afraid of so many things, and it's paralyzing in the midst of suffering, in the midst of difficulties, in the midst of loss and dark valleys. We get afraid. And David says in verse 4, he says, even though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, even though I walk through the dark, dark valley of suffering and pain and hardship, I will fear no evil. Why? For you are with me. Your rod and your staff, they comfort me. I think if there's any verse that's given people maybe more comfort than anything else, maybe that might be the one. Even though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I'll fear no evil because God is with me. And if God is with me, who realistically can be against me? If God is on my side, what is the worst that can happen to me? I've got an advocate that's bigger than anything the world can throw against me because he's overcome the world already. I'm saying, again, this is his declaration because David went through those deep, dark valleys, didn't he? David had the suffering and the pain. And he says, you know what? Even though I'm walking through this, I will not fear evil because God is with me. And he's reminding himself and he's declaring, God is with me, whether I can feel it or see it or not. God is with me, and I'm not going to be afraid. And there's incredible confidence in placing your trust in that. There's incredible confidence. There's peace in that. And once again, because of the suffering that I've been going through in my life, I've had to learn sink or swim. You do this, or you get overcome by fear and stress. Learn how to trust God in the midst of suffering. Learn how to look to Him. Learn how to fear not. Or you're going to be overcome by the same kind of worry and fear and stress that the rest of the world has to deal with on a constant basis. And David's reminding himself, he's like, I'm not alone in this. Whether I feel alone or not, I'm not alone, just like we aren't alone. He's crying it out. He's believing it. And so, you know what? Some of you guys, I'm sure, just by statistics, I'm sure some of you guys are going through that kind of dark valley right now. Maybe it's a shallow one. Maybe it's a really deep one. Maybe you can't see how you're going to get out of it. Maybe you can't see a light at the end of the tunnel. I don't know what you're going through. But this right here, that's the antidote to not being overcome. Is stopping in the midst of your stress and worry and fear and saying, I will not be afraid. I will not be afraid because God is with me. God is with me. And what really can happen to me if God is with me? Just like David reminds himself, remind yourself of that now. And remind yourself of that tomorrow and the next day. And you make a habit of reminding yourself of these things, just like David declared these words, because that kills stress really quick. It kills it off and it gives strength. And so I think all these are simple ideas, but I think they're profound as well. Because so often it's the simple things that we fail to put into practice that are our undoing. And so I'd encourage you to take these things we just talked about and start trying them out. Psalm 23 is, unfortunately, one of those scriptures that we read so many times that we kind of glaze over the words. We don't really think about them. But take this and start reading it and start speaking those things out into, like, making them personal in your life. Saying, God, I will look to you as my provider, God. God, I will take the time I need to rest and appreciate the beauty of the world, Father. God, I will not fear. I will not be afraid. Start declaring these things in your life. So I don't know what kind of burdens you're holding on to today. You know, we're all carrying burdens. I've got mine and you've got yours. We're all carrying stuff. I have no idea what they are for you, but I'm convinced that I know the answer. Jesus puts it like this in Matthew chapter 11. He says, come to me, all you who are weary and carrying heavy burdens, and I will give you rest. I will give you rest. He says, don't come to church and I'll give you rest. Don't come to a class or a small group. That's all good stuff, right? It's all good stuff. He says, but come to me. Come to me and I will give you rest. And as we begin to wrap up and have the band come up here and play one last song, he finishes up this point in the next verse. He says, take my yoke upon you and learn from me, for I am gentle and lowly in heart, and you'll find rest for your souls. For my yoke is easy and my burden is light. And when I was a child, I didn't understand that verse for a long time. I thought yoke meant like an egg yolk. Didn't make any sense. Well, what I've come to find, as I think many of you have as well, that a yoke is actually it's this board with two arches that you put on the back of two cattle so that they pull a cart together. And so in first century Jewish rabbinical history, they would use the word yoke to represent their teaching and say, here is what of the law you need to take on to yourself. Here is the load that you must carry in terms of what God commands you to do. And some would demand very much, and some would demand less. And so you'd say his yoke is difficult. It's hard to carry because it's so hard to follow this man's teaching. And Jesus was a rabbi just like these guys. And he's saying, I don't know what you're carrying, but you come to me, and my yoke is easy, the burden I give you is light, because what I call for is not following a bunch of dead religious commands. He says, what I call for is relationship. What I call for is something deeper than religion. It's something more real, and it's a whole lot easier than religion too. At the same time, it exists at a deeper plane. It's relationship over commands. just like David cries this out in the midst of his suffering, in the midst of his persecution, in the midst of his difficulties, in the midst of his own son trying to kill him, as we know from history. He says, God, I look to you as my provider. I look to you as my caretaker, Lord. God, I'll continue to appreciate the beautiful world you've given me and rest in it. Father, I'll continue to go to you as my director and for my guidance. And Father, despite the deep valley I walk through, I have confidence that you're with me. And I won't fear because of that. I have no need to. And so, Father, thank you that you are with us in the valley. Thank you that you offer a hand to guide us in our hard decisions, Lord. Thank you that you beckon us to rest and to relax and to be replenished. And thank you that you are our provider, Lord. You are our shepherd, God. And God, thank you that your yoke is easy and your burden is light. And you don't command something of us that is impossible, but you command something that is easy and is natural for us to do, and that is relationship with you. We love you, Father.